Let me take up Adani Ports. I have my colleague Puneet, who's standing by to give us the latest on the same. Puneet.
Well, thanks for that. So, as you rightly said, now Adani Ports is going to be entering the Sensex, will be the first company from the group to enter this particular prestigious group. Now, it will be replacing Wipro from the 24th of June, and we will be seeing its entry into the Sensex. Now, we wanted to take a deep dive into how the company has progressed over the past few years. Let's start with the geographical exposure of ports across the country. As you can see, it started with just one port in Gujarat, which was the Mundra port. By 2013, it had roughly 10% market share in India's port business, but roughly all of that came from just one port, which was the Mundra port. Over the last 10 to 12 years, the company has expanded its presence not only on the west, but also on the east coast. And as we can see, Mundra being 264 million tons, which is roughly around the 35% of the total capacity of roughly 620 MMT. But we see that across the western as well as the eastern port, the company has added newer avenues as well as capacities and ports over the past 10 to 12 years. The two major ones I want to talk about is firstly the Gopalpur port on the east coast. We have seen the 20 MMT. The company has acquired this port from Shapurji Pallonji this year. And the other one is down south in Kerala, which is the Vizhinjam port, which is roughly 18 MMT. Now, this is India's first port which has, a very deep capacity to take on ships which can't be taken on in other ports. So across the west as well as the east coast, it has expanded presence. Currently, roughly 27% market share in the port to cargo volumes of the whole country. So a really sizable presence that Adani Port has developed over the past 10 to 12 years. Ever since expanding into multiple ports. When we move on to how the market share, where I alluded to, up to 27% now, which was up from roughly 10%, which was there back in 2013. So if we can show that in 2013, it had one port, which was the Mundra port. It has steadily increased over the past 11 to 12 years and has reached 27% market share, which is India's largest private operator. When you look at the numbers of cargo, that has been supported as well, which will be confirmed with this increased market share as well. When we look at the cargo volumes, especially from the COVID lows, and move on to the next graphic, when you look at from roughly 75, which we have seen in Q3 of FY23, we've seen that increase to all the way to 100 MMT. Now, that is just a quarterly volume trend. And if you see back when, because of COVID, it has down to just 41 MMT per quarter, more than doubled going all the way there. And we see that, at the start of before COVID, it was roughly at 48 MMT. So increasing, it's doubled its capacity in this particular time frame of roughly 5 years. And going forward, the momentum is just positive. When you look at the numbers, the financial numbers, how are the financial numbers looking at? If you look at the EBITDA trend of Adani Ports, that is also a very strong picture. The market share as well as this thing has supported the EBITDA numbers as well. From 2012, just from roughly 1,700 odd crores of EBITDA, we've seen this steadily increase and almost, be roughly 8x of that level to come in at roughly 15,800 crores. If you look at around the pre-COVID era of roughly 7,000 crores of EBITDA it used to do per year, it's doubled in the last 5 years in that aspect as well. And when we look at the profitability, if it's come down, that has come down as well. When you look at the next, the profitability chart from just roughly 1,100 odd crores in that particular time frame, it has increased all the way up to 8,000 crores. We see a sizable jump from roughly the 2019 levels pre-COVID as well, taking out all kinds of impact it had, and we've seen that double to roughly 8,000 crores. When you move into how the share price has performed on these particular numbers, that is also a very stellar performance from roughly 200 to 300 odd rupees. When you look at the share price, how it's risen, specifically, we see this particular drop, which was because of the COVID impact. But since then, it has had multiple levers of growth over the past few years. Now, finally, when we look at what is the way forward for the company as well, we spoke about it being India's biggest port operator. It is also and one interesting part is that in FY21, it had given a guidance of roughly 30,000 crores of revenues by FY25. At the end of this fiscal year of 24, it already had roughly 26,700 crores of revenues. And that is the key, that it is meeting all guidance of that. The next one, when we see on, the stock price is roughly tripled from the Hindenburg lows from the past financial year. And also that it is a strong player in the international operations as well. It is also developing a port, a container terminal in Sri Lanka. It has an operation and maintenance in Australia as well as Tanzania. And one of the biggest pivots for international operations has been that it's going to be operating Israel's largest port, the Haifa port, which the government of Israel privatized in 2022. Finally, FY30, the company has given a guidance, and a solid guidance of 1,000 MMT. Currently, at the end of the financial year 24, it had roughly 398 MMT of volumes that they did. And if it's the guidance is really strong on that. If we look at the revenue guidance as well, 50,000 crores of revenues, up from roughly 26,000 that we've seen at the end of FY24. And finally, on EBITDA margins as well, really strong EBITDA margins coming in at 64% by that time. So overall, a really strong picture coming in from Adani Ports. The history has shown that it's strong on execution, and the future looks promising. Back to you.